I travel frequently for work, and hotel rooms have become a second home to me. I've stayed in everything from luxurious suites to budget motels, always looking for that comfortable middle ground. On a recent business trip, I booked a room at the Grand Vista Hotel in San Francisco, California. It was a reputable establishment, known for its modern amenities and excellent service. I checked in late in the evening, tired from a long day of meetings and eager to get some rest. The room was just as expected, clean, stylish, and well-appointed. A large king-sized bed dominated the space, with a sleek desk and a comfortable lounge chair by the window, offering a view of the city. I quickly unpacked, set up my laptop on the desk, and began catching up on some last-minute emails. It was the usual routine, something I could do almost automatically at this point. After finishing my work, I decided to relax with a hot shower. As I stepped out of the bathroom, I noticed something odd. There was a small black object on the bookshelf facing the bed. It looked like a charger or some kind of electronic device. Curious, I picked it up. It was a USB charger with a tiny pinhole lens on the side. My stomach dropped. It looked like a hidden camera. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Why would there be a camera in my room? I quickly scanned the rest of the room, looking for any other devices. Near the TV, I found another, this time hidden in what appeared to be an air freshener. Panic set in, as I realized that someone had been watching me, perhaps even recording my every move. I considered my options. Should I call the hotel management? The police? But what if they were in on it? My mind raced with possibilities, each more sinister than the last. Trying to stay calm, I decided to document everything. I took out my phone and photographed the hidden cameras, making sure to get clear shots of the devices and their placements. I felt a sense of urgency growing. Whoever had placed these cameras might be watching me right now. I unplugged the devices and placed them on the bed, feeling slightly better but still on edge. I needed to figure out who was behind this and get out of there. I grabbed my laptop and started searching online for any incidents or reviews mentioning hidden cameras at the Grand Vista Hotel. I found nothing, which only made me more uneasy. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. I hesitated, then approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's hotel security, sir. We received a report of some unusual activity in your room." My blood ran cold. Unusual activity? Did they know I had found the cameras? I took a deep breath and opened the door. A man in a hotel uniform stood there, looking professional and calm. He gave me a reassuring smile. "Is everything all right, sir? We just wanted to check in and make sure." I considered lying, saying everything was fine, but decided against it. "Actually, no," I said, stepping back to let him in. "I found these hidden cameras in my room." I gestured to the devices on the bed. The security officer's expression shifted from polite concern to serious attention. He walked over to the bed and examined the cameras. "This is very concerning," he said, looking back at me. "Let me take these downstairs and call the police. We'll get to the bottom of this." He collected the devices and left the room, leaving me standing there, feeling exposed and vulnerable. I locked the door behind him and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even with the cameras gone. Finally, the phone rang. It was the hotel manager, apologizing profusely for the situation. He assured me that they were taking this very seriously and that the police were on their way. He offered to move me to another room, but I declined. I didn't want to stay in the hotel any longer than necessary. The police arrived shortly after and took my statement. They were professional and thorough, assuring me that they would investigate the matter. I handed over the photos I had taken and gave them a detailed description of the cameras and where I had found them. The officers asked if I had noticed anything else unusual or if anyone had been acting suspiciously. I told them about the knock on the door from hotel security and how the officer had taken the devices. The officers exchanged a glance. "Sir," one of them said, "we don't have hotel security officers collecting evidence. That man wasn't with us." A chill ran down my spine. Who had I let into my room? And where were the cameras now? The police searched the hotel for the man I had described, but found no one matching his description. The hotel's security footage revealed nothing. No sign of the man entering or leaving the building. The investigation quickly hit a dead end. The cameras had been professionally hidden and there were no clear leads on who had placed them or why. The hotel management cooperated fully with the police, but they seemed just as baffled as I was. I checked out that night, not willing to stay another minute in that room. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I checked into a new hotel, I meticulously searched the room for hidden cameras, my paranoia growing. The police never found the man who had posed as hotel security, and the case eventually went cold. The experience left me deeply unsettled, a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities we face even in seemingly safe environments. To this day, I double-check every room I stay in, always wary, always on guard. The Grand Vista Hotel experience taught me a lesson I'll never forget. You never really know who might be watching. During a road trip, I was passing through Vermont when I started feeling sleepy behind the wheel. It was getting late, so I decided to stop in a small town called Middlebury. I looked for a hotel or motel and found a place called Middlebury Country Inn. It looked a little run down, but so did the whole town, to be honest. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a night's sleep. I parked in the lot and went to the small front office, which was located in the front corner of one of the two buildings that made up the motel. There was an older woman sitting behind the desk reading a book. The room was hot, and a table fan buzzed loudly, barely making a difference. I asked for a room, and she finally looked up from her book without greeting me and said $65. I assumed she meant $65 for the room, so I handed her my credit card. I asked if I could get a corner room, but she simply said, no. Clearly, customer service was not included in the price. She handed me an old-fashioned key on a plain keyring. They still used actual keys at this place. I walked across the parking lot to my room. The door was difficult to unlock. I had to jiggle the key a bit before it finally turned. Before going in, I looked around the lot. There were only 2 other cars in the parking lot. It felt like a ghost town. I stepped into the room, and it smelled like a mix of stale cotton and something unpleasantly sour. I considered going back to ask for a different room, but I realized that all the rooms probably smelled the same, given the state of the place. The room was small, with a worn-out blue carpet, a couch, a small coffee table, and a bed. I shut the door and tried to lock it, but it was difficult, more so than unlocking it. After about 30 seconds of struggling, I felt like I might have broken it. But when I tried opening the door, it wouldn't budge. It wasn't fully locked, but as long as the door stayed closed, that was all that mattered to me at the moment. I crawled into the bed, the old spring squeaking under my weight. I tried to turn on the TV, but of course the remote didn't work. Frustrated, I just lay down and tried to fall asleep. That's when it happened. I nearly jumped out of my skin when there was a loud thump at the window. I looked and saw a woman standing outside peering in. She started talking, sounding hurt and in need of help. She said, "Please, let me in. I've hurt myself. I need help." She definitely saw me lying in the bed. I yelled back, telling her to go to the front desk, but she wouldn't stop pleading. There was no way I was opening that door. I had a bad feeling that this was some kind of trap. Eventually, after ignoring her for long enough, she left. I got up to check and make sure she was gone. When I looked out, she had indeed left. Feeling a bit shaken, I checked the lock on the door again to make sure it was secure. I gave the door a couple of good pulls and it didn't open. I then closed the curtains over the windows so she couldn't come back and see inside. That encounter rattled me. But after about half an hour, my nerves calmed and I started to drift off to sleep. I began having a strange dream where I was in an empty supermarket, running from a store manager who was chasing me. As the dream continued, I started hearing these clicking sounds. The noise grew louder until it seemed to take over the whole dream. Suddenly, I woke up. The room was cold. and I realized the blanket had been pulled off of me. As I sat up to pull the blanket back over, I saw a tall figure standing at the foot of the bed. Before I could scream, he raised a finger to his lips and whispered, "Shh, don't move." He told me he wouldn't hurt me if I stayed quiet and didn't make any sudden movements. Then he asked where my wallet was. I told him it was in my jeans pocket on the floor. I watched terrified as he moved from the foot of the bed to where my jeans lay. I heard him rummaging through the pocket until he found my wallet. He asked if I had anything else of value. I told him I was just on a road trip and didn't have much with me. Without another word, he left the room. As soon as he was gone, I rushed to try and lock the door, struggling as I had before. I then called the police, but they weren't able to provide immediate help. Later, we reviewed the security footage with the front desk attendant. The man had been wearing a face mask and a hat, hiding his features. I got my money back and decided to leave, thankful that I hadn't had much cash in my wallet. I canceled all my cards and ended up sleeping in my car that night. I learned a valuable lesson. Never stop at a sketchy motel, no matter how tired you are. I've always been a bit of a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural. My job as a travel writer has taken me to countless hotels around the world, from luxurious resorts to seedy motels. I've heard all the ghost stories, urban legends, and creepy tales, but I never really believed them. That was until my stay at the Silver Oaks Inn, a quaint historic hotel nestled in the quiet town of Pine Hollow, Colorado. What was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway turned into a bone-chilling experience that still haunts me to this day. It all started innocently enough. I had planned a short trip to Pine Hollow to write about the town's famous fall foliage and cozy accommodations. The Silver Oaks Inn was perfect for my article. An old Victorian building with a storied past beautifully preserved and exuding charm. The owner, Mrs. Thompson, welcomed me with a warm smile and gave me a quick tour of the premises, proudly sharing bits of the hotel's history. The inn had been a family-run establishment for over a century, passed down through generations. She mentioned that the inn had been a favorite among travelers for its peaceful ambiance and scenic views. My room was on the third floor, a quaint little suite with antique furniture and a large bay window overlooking the forest. It felt like stepping back in time. I spent the afternoon exploring the town, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the vibrant colors of the changing leaves. By the time I returned to the hotel, it was dusk. I settled into my room, pulled out my laptop, and started jotting down notes for my article. As night fell, the inn grew quiet. The only sounds were the occasional creaks of the old building settling and the wind rustling through the trees outside. I had just finished writing when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere above me. I paused, listening closely. The sound was steady, almost like footsteps pacing back and forth. I shrugged it off as an old building making noise and went back to my work. A few minutes later, the tapping stopped, and I heard a soft knock on my door. I opened it, expecting to see Mrs. Thompson or one of the staff, but the hallway was empty. Confused, I stepped out and looked around, but there was no one there. I closed the door, feeling a slight unease settle in. I shook it off and decided to call it a night. Around midnight, I was awakened by the sound of a door creaking open. I sat up, straining to listen. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of someone walking in the hallway. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and seemed to stop right outside my door. My heart raced as I waited, holding my breath. There was a soft knock just like before. This time I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door, only to find the hallway deserted once again. Now fully awake and thoroughly spooked, I decided to investigate. I walked down the hall, peering into the dimly lit corridors. The inn was eerily silent, and every shadow seemed to hold a secret. I checked the guest rooms, finding them all empty. Most of the rooms were vacant, as the inn wasn't particularly busy this time of year. But as I approached the end of the hall, I noticed one room with the door slightly ajar, room 312. I knocked softly, then pushed the door open. The room was empty, but something felt off. The air was cold, and I noticed an odd, musty smell, like old books mixed with dampness. The bed was neatly made, and there were no signs of recent occupancy. I stepped inside, looking around. That's when I saw it. a small, dusty journal lying on the nightstand. It looked ancient, the leather cover worn and cracked. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly. As I flipped through the pages, I realized it was a guest book, filled with entries from decades ago. Most of the entries were mundane, notes about pleasant stays and kind words about the staff. But as I reached the final pages, the entries became more erratic, filled with frantic scribbles and unsettling comments about strange noises and ghostly apparitions. One entry caught my eye. It was dated 50 years ago, written by a man named James Porter. The handwriting was messy, almost desperate. It described a haunting experience. James had heard footsteps in the hallway, followed by knocking on his door, just like I had. He wrote about seeing a shadowy figure at the foot of his bed and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The entry ended abruptly with a final chilling note. I can't take it anymore. The tapping won't stop. I have to leave. As I finished reading, a chill ran down my spine. It was too similar to what I was experiencing. I quickly put the journal down and left the room, closing the door behind me. My mind raced as I returned to my room, trying to make sense of what I had read. Could it be that the hotel was haunted? The rational part of me rejected the idea, but the eerie events of the night made me question everything. Back in my room, I double-checked the lock on my door and crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I lay there wide awake, listening to the sounds of the old inn. Hours passed, and just as I was starting to relax, I heard it again. The tapping. It was louder this time, more insistent. My heart pounded in my chest as I clutched the blankets tighter. The sound moved closer, stopping right outside my door. Suddenly, the door handle rattled, as if someone was trying to open it. I froze, my eyes locked on the door. The rattling stopped, and then, to my horror, the door slowly creaked open. My breath caught in my throat as I stared into the darkness beyond. A shadowy figure stood in the doorway, its form indistinct but undeniably there. It felt like time stood still as we stared at each other, the air thick with tension. The figure slowly raised a hand, pointing directly at me. An icy chill washed over me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to flee. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure then turned and disappeared down the hallway. As soon as it was gone, I jumped out of bed, grabbed my things, and ran out of the room. I didn't stop until I was in my car, speeding away from the Silver Oaks Inn. The next day I contacted Mrs. Thompson and apologized for leaving so abruptly. I didn't mention the haunting or the figure in the hallway. I didn't want to sound crazy. She seemed understanding and told me that strange things had happened at the inn before. But she never believed the stories. I knew better. I never finished the article about Pine Hollow. The memory of that night still lingers, and I can't shake the feeling that something followed me from the Silver Oaks Inn. I've stayed in countless hotels since then, but none have left me as terrified as that one. Sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear the faint tapping, a reminder of the phantom guest that haunted my stay at the Silver Oaks Inn. It was supposed to be a routine business trip, a quick overnight stay at the Redwood Hotel in Seattle, Washington. The hotel was modern and sleek, nestled in the heart of downtown, a perfect spot for both tourists and business travelers. I checked in late in the afternoon, exhausted from a long day of meetings. My room on the 7th floor was spacious and comfortable, with a great view of the city skyline. I had no idea that this seemingly normal evening would turn into the most terrifying night of my life. I spent the evening preparing for my presentation the next day, reviewing notes and organizing slides. Around 8 p.m., I decided to take a break and head down to the hotel bar for a drink and some dinner. The bar was bustling with the usual crowd, business people unwinding after a long day, tourists chatting excitedly about their plans, and a few locals enjoying the upscale atmosphere. As I sipped my drink and waited for my meal, I noticed a group of men enter the bar. They were dressed casually, nothing particularly remarkable about them, but something about their demeanor caught my attention. They seemed tense, constantly glancing around as if looking for someone. I brushed it off as paranoia from a long day and turned my attention back to my phone. Suddenly, the mood in the bar shifted. The men pulled out guns and the room fell silent. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, stepped forward and spoke in a commanding voice. "Everyone, stay calm and do exactly as we say. This is a robbery, but no one needs to get hurt." My heart pounded in my chest as the reality of the situation sunk in. We were being held hostage. The other patrons looked equally terrified, some with their hands raised, others frozen in shock. The men quickly moved to secure the exits, locking the doors and drawing the curtains over the windows. The leader continued, "We just need a few hours and then we'll be out of your hair. Cooperate, and this will all be over soon." The robbers forced everyone to hand over their phones and valuables, piling them onto a table. They were efficient and methodical, clearly experienced. As they moved through the room, one of the men grabbed a young woman who had been sitting near the back. She cried out and the leader shot her a warning look. "No one leaves this room, understand?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. The situation was bad, but it could get worse if anyone tried to resist or escape. I glanced around the room looking for any way out, but the robbers had covered all the exits. We were trapped. As the minutes turned into an hour, tension in the room grew. The robbers mostly ignored us, focusing on their own plans. They communicated in low voices, occasionally glancing at a tablet one of them held. I couldn't see what they were looking at, but it was clear they were waiting for something, or someone. Just when it seemed like the standoff might drag on indefinitely, one of the robbers suddenly stood up and started shouting, "They're here! We need to move!" Panic flashed across the leader's face. He turned to the hostages, his voice hard. "All right, everyone. We're going to move to another room. Stay close, stay quiet, and no one gets hurt." We were herded out of the bar and into a back hallway. As we walked, I noticed several doors along the corridor, some leading to conference rooms, others to storage areas. The robbers led us to a large conference room, forcing us inside and locking the door behind us. The room was dimly lit, with heavy drapes covering the windows. A few overhead lights cast long shadows, making the space feel even more claustrophobic. We were told to sit on the floor, and one of the men stood guard by the door. The rest of the robbers huddled together, speaking urgently. I strained to hear their conversation, catching snippets about police response times and possible escape routes. My anxiety grew as I realized the gravity of the situation. They hadn't planned for this. Something had gone wrong. After what felt like an eternity, the leader approached us. "All right, change of plans. We're going to use a few of you as leverage. The rest of you stay here. Don't try anything stupid." He pointed at me and two others, a middle-aged man and a young woman. "You three, up!" Fear surged through me as I stood up, unsure of what was about to happen. The leader ordered us to stand by the door, while the rest of the hostages huddled together, looking scared and helpless. The door opened and we were led out into the hallway. As we walked, I noticed the sounds of distant sirens. The police were here. We were taken to a service elevator and brought down to the basement. The robbers seemed agitated, their plan unraveling before their eyes. The leader spoke into a walkie-talkie, his voice tense. "We're coming out. We have hostages. Don't try anything." There was a pause, then a crackling response. "We're ready. Just don't hurt anyone." The elevator doors opened and we were marched through a maze of hallways, finally emerging into a dimly lit underground parking garage. The robbers pushed us toward a van parked near the exit. My heart raced as I realized they intended to take us with them. But just as we reached the van, a blinding light filled the garage and a booming voice echoed through the space. "This is the police. Drop your weapons and surrender." The robbers froze, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then chaos erupted. The robbers shouted at each other, some dropping their weapons, others raising them in a futile act of defiance. The police swarmed in, guns drawn, shouting commands. It was over in seconds. The robbers were overwhelmed and disarmed. As the adrenaline subsided, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The police officers quickly checked on us, making sure we were unharmed. We were escorted out of the garage and I stepped into the cool night air, finally free from the nightmare. The aftermath was a blur of statements, flashing lights, and concerned faces. The police took our statements and I learned that the robbers had been part of a larger criminal ring, planning a major heist that went awry. The hostages in the conference room were safely rescued, and the robbers were taken into custody. I left the Redwood Hotel that night, shaken, but grateful to be alive. The experience left me with a deep respect for the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of the world. I've stayed in many hotels since, but I always check the locks, the exits, and keep a watchful eye on my surroundings. Some fears once experienced never truly fade.